Okay, here we are in our final discussion.
Woo.
I know. I feel like we needed a laugh track or an applause track or something.
Wait, how can there we go.
I love it. That's amazing.
Um, okay, so this week we were reading articles on psychodynamics and psychopharmacology. And the first of a two-part discussion, the first question is discuss the extent to which you feel comfortable advocating for a client. If a senior clinician told a client incorrect information about a medication, what would you do? Talk about the nuances of the situation.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Oh, really? How come?
I guess I just like struggle with I guess like not wanting to like undermine a senior clinician or like break trust between a client and like a senior clinician or like and their psychiatrist, but then also wanting to tell them accurate information. Yeah. Curious what you were thinking there, Dolby.
I had this moment of, oh, facts are facts. Like in one instance, finally facts, like what the medication is. And a lot of my career is having to has been engaging with people who say things that are not accurate, and them being in a position of power and me having to be like, interesting take, and then having to present facts. So I don't know. I think it could be tricky, but it also could be an opportunity to be curious about. It almost feels like an invitation to share what you do know. Like, oh wow, that's an interesting lens. Here's kind of literature. Here's kind of a podcast, or here's information that I was consulting that gave me a different lens. Maybe it's something you want to take back to your doctor or clinician to help you understand and reconcile the differences.
Mm.
I really like that framing that you give, Golby. I think that's yeah, I think it's an elegant and graceful way of presenting the information. From my previous experience working in a clinic, I kind of identify with Aspen's take on this because I think that there's hierarchy within a clinic setting, and I'm putting myself in my shoes of working in that clinic setting and thinking I wouldn't want to undermine um,
Mm.
someone's seniority or authority or their relationship with their client, but also it's of the utmost importance to give facts, to give
Mm.
clear and true information to the client. So
I totally hear that. I'm
yeah.
almost wondering, that made me realize, ooh, I probably would operate differently if we were in the same clinic and I knew this person and had a relationship, because then I could go to them maybe between sessions and be like, we see things, we're like consulting different information than if
Hmm.
I didn't know them. And it was actually I felt more like I couldn't necessarily go to them so directly, and I might need to give it to the client themselves to try and kind of mediate the different sources of information. If I was in your scenario, Aaron, where I was at a clinic and it was someone else at the clinic, um, I might actually pause on telling the client themselves or the patient, and I might have a chat to the person, the senior clinician, and ask them to help me understand kind of what they're seeing or where they're seeing information, because I see different information. And then maybe there was some chance for me to learn something, or if not, if they recognize where they're were kind of consulting old info or wrong info, that they could then rectify it themselves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm thinking just like, yeah, with that approach, just kind of, yeah, a collaborative care team, like you're going to this person and going to support your client together. And yeah, rather than like being too quick and like telling your client something without consulting their care team and like figuring that out. Which does, yeah, I mean, we could like, even if we don't know the psychiatrist or whatever, if the client is still seeing this senior clinician, we could like get a release of information and talk with them before we share anything with our client. But I did really like, Goldie, like what you said about like, here's some information that you can go talk to your doctor with. Here are the articles. All like that approach feels really good to me because it's not like just like telling the client from your position of power, like, no, that person's wrong over there, and just like making that the end of the conversation. It's saying like, oh, here's the tools, like you need to understand this. Like we both, me and your psychiatrist both want to support you. Let's just like start this conversation.
I like that.
Yeah, and this, I mean, this kind of dovetails with the articles as well. It's making me think about a scenario in which someone might have material coming up for them about being kind of in the middle of two clinicians, where there's something, there's something happening, something playing out for them, um, you know, on the psychic level, where it's like maybe object relations, like maybe like it's bringing up things about caregivers, like being caught between
Yeah.
parents, or misinformation, or withholding information, or it's just, that's interesting. Those articles really got me thinking in a different way about how medication can play out at a psychic level, and the prescribing of it can mean different things symbolically. I hadn't really thought of that.
I love that. You're right. All of a sudden I was thinking of the kid that's like playing their parents, or like if they are raised by two parents against each other, or maybe it's not them playing it, it's that the caregivers, to your point, are using them as the shuttle. There could be a definite reaction to that. That's so clever. And I also really like the article. I hadn't really thought in that lens. I highlighted a few things that I thought, a few sentences that I thought were super cool. Let's see if I can find them.
Yeah. I also, there was I thought it was a super interesting article as well. And I also have something that I'd like to bring in. Let me try to find it. Oh, how are we on time?
We're pretty good on time. You're at the 8-minute mark.
Okay, great.
The quote that you just reminded me of, Aaron, was from the 6-page article that said, patients who have been abused or neglected by caregivers in the past, or for those who otherwise feel vulnerable to authority figures, are prone to nocebo responses, meaning like, and that, what you just said made me think, oh, right, we have to be really careful about how we relate to the other care team, because all of us in theory have authority or power potentially in the eyes of the client. What was your bit?
Well, I absolutely was going to bring in nocebo as well. I thought it was a really interesting, interesting concept. It's the inverse of a placebo, and I had never heard that before.
Nor I.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing, especially to hold as like given that this class in our school and a lot of our field is like a little bit is like critical of psychiatry in a lot of ways. And yeah, so that's why I've always like with the critical psych lens been a little bit careful with how to bring it in with clients, because I don't want to undermine to change the way that their relationship to change their relationship to drugs in a way that makes it like makes them not work for them as well. That kind of thing. So like I know with myself, like just like yeah, like I've been so hesitant to like go to a psychiatrist when I've been in like places where that could be supportive, because I have all this information and I'm very skeptical. But then I'm also thinking about just being like oppression aware. That's another piece. And just why might some people be more skeptical of psychiatry, and why might that make them like more treatment resistant?
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, the non-compliance of a medication because there's some kind of enactment occurring is super interesting to me. And it's not something that I had ever thought of. But yeah, it makes sense, and it's now in my frame of thought.
Mhm. Mhm. Any other nuances that you all can think of? One thought, answer my own question. One thought around advocating is this idea of, are we advocating because we think we should be advocating, or are we advocating because the client wants someone to advocate for them?
Hmm.
What do I discuss the extent to which you feel comfortable advocating for a client? Yeah, it's really like how, if they're unaware, and we're doing it on their behalf, but without their kind of consent or assent per se, like what dynamic does that create?
Right? Yeah. It's like, what is being brought up in us? Like, is there like a projective kind of need in us? Are they projecting this need in us to advocate for them? Like,
Mm.
what's coming up there?
Really getting into the psychodynamic.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think that's interesting.
yeah, absolutely.
Should we move on, or do you all feel like there's something else you want to offer to nerd out on?
We're at like 12 minutes 30. I think we've kind of been in the waters of both questions. So if there are any other things that you wanted to bring in from like the articles, that feels
Good.
open for those.
Mm, 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 mm. Let's see.
I like the intake question. What would a client stand to lose if the treatment was successful?
Mhm. Yeah.
Or to understand ambivalence.
I also like the psychodynamic psychopharmacology provides little guidance about what to prescribe. Instead, it helps prescribers know how to prescribe to improve outcomes. Wait, there was a better sentence. It was basically like, wait, it was like the disease for the human. Do you remember? Hold on. Scratch that, I'll find it. Oh, yeah. Sir William Osler, the father of modern medicine, remarked, it's much more important to know what sort of patient has a disease than to know what sort of disease a patient has.
Wait,
Sort of patient.
could you say that
Yeah.
again?
It's much more important to know what sort of patient has a disease than what sort of disease a patient has.
Yeah.
Meaning that we need to know their developmental and social history and their like psychosocial structure in order to make sure that people who can prescribe the right thing, as opposed to being like, oh, you have bipolar is treated by this, independent of kind of like who the human is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in a perfect situation, or in a better situation, I think that all of that would be uh, taken into account. But I just think that with the medical model that we have right now, it's just there's so little time. People are overworked. We're okay. Stop the video. Well, thank you.